it's Ashley. You know those TikTok videos, the book talk ones specifically, where it's like you try to read this new release, but then you just go back to one of your comfort reads and it's like whatever that person's comfort read and they're just like reading it. Basically, that is what this video is. It's all about the books that I return to time and time again for comfort and joy. My favorite comfort reads. The first book is 10,000 Lovers by Edith Revell. It was a Heather's pick. If you are Canadian, you know what that means. Basically, she is the CEO of Chapters Indigo. Is she still the CEO? I don't know. At the time when I bought this book, she was, and it's like the same idea behind like a Reese's book club or an Oprah book club pick. The book is about Israel in the 1970s, specifically two characters, one who is a student of literature and linguistics. She's living in Israel and going to school there. And another is an interrogator who works for the Israeli Defense Force. The tagline in the book is "Love in an Impossible World." You know that song, "We Found Love in a Hopeless Place"? It's a little bit like that idea. I love when a love story rises out of tough situations like that. In this case, because it's Israel in the 1970s, there's looming war, previous wars that have happened. There is, depending on your definition of things, terrorist attacks. There is some real complexity though in the way the author tackles these issues. And then the ending of this story, I cried, and sometimes when I reread this, I don't go to the ending because I don't want to get upset again, and other times I'm like, I need a good cry, and so I let myself feel it. Initially, when I picked up this book, I remember I grabbed it right before I was going on a beach vacation. I was going to an all-inclusive in Mexico, and I was like, I'll start the book now, read some of it at the airport, and then some of it when I'm on the vacation. No, I read it all before I even packed my bag. I absolutely adore this book. It is an all-time favorite. It is something I'm always going to go back to as my comfort read when I want to reread, when I want comfort and joy. This is a favorite, and nobody ever talks about it on Book Talk. I have never seen this book in an Instagram, a Bookstagram post, a Book Talk post, a BookTube video, a book, whatever you could find on the internet. I have never seen this book. And like I said, Heather likes it and I like it, so maybe you should give it a try. Okay, can you see this? Eat, Pray, Love by Elizabeth Gilbert. It's called One Woman's Search for Everything Across Italy, India, and Indonesia. Elizabeth Gilbert is an author. She has written multiple books before she wrote Eat, Pray, Love. I don't believe any had the mass success that Eat, Pray, Love did. This was like a huge breakthrough for her. And unlike her previous works, which were fiction, this book was autobiographical. Her life fell apart, she got divorced, and she put all the stuff she had in a storage locker and embarked on a life-changing trip, first to Italy, next to India, and then finally to Indonesia. And the title comes from the main activities she did in each of those places. In Italy, she's focused on food. She makes lots of friendships. In India, she goes to an ashram, so she's focused on spirituality and prayer. And then in Indonesia, she learns about balance. India was really a lot of self-deprivation and, not having possessions, focusing on prayer, doing cleaning activities and things in the ashram. And then Italy was more about like pleasure, eating, drinking wine, that type of thing. And then in Indonesia, it's for finding balance between these two things and also finding a new life partner. So she wrote another book, and it was an exploration of the history of marriage, and I was engaged at the time, so I think it was maybe even my fiance bought me that book, and I really liked it as well. But this one is my favorite just because when we're feeling in the gutter, or we're dealt a lot of gutter balls, it's nice to read about someone who's in the gutter and climbs out, and how they get out, and get a little inspiration from that. And I love Elizabeth Gilbert's writing in this. For the audiobook, she does the narration, so it's not some other narrator, it's actually her voice. So that is Eat, Pray, Love. Do not watch the movie. It is not as good as the book. And I am the first person to say that some film adaptations are better than the book. As an example, I prefer the Shadow and Bone television show to the Grishaverse of books. Yes, I said it. And this doesn't hold. This is the opposite. Oh, and sometimes I think that the books are equally as good as the films, like The Hunger Games. So this one is definitely, book is better. I haven't heard anybody talk about this book recently, but it is definitely a comfort read of mine and will always be in my library collection. So Ali Hazelwood, if you haven't heard of her, she is the author of The Love Hypothesis, which was one of my favorite books because it featured a woman in STEM as the heroine or protagonist. That book is not without its problems, and I know that, but I really liked the idea of focusing on a woman in STEM. So when Ali Hazelwood came out with 3 novellas called the STEMinist novellas, I really wanted to check them out. I read all 3, and one of them really stuck with me, which is funny because it's called Stuck With You. And it is about an engineer named Sadie. She works at a very small firm that's focused on sustainable green design. And she has a lot of weird, quirky habits. She's very superstitious. And one of her superstitions is when she goes to do a pitch meeting, she goes and gets this really terrible tasting croissant from a local cafe. And the very last croissant is bought by the person ahead of her, none other than Eric, who I don't know, but he seems to be specifically based on Eric Northman from the True Blood series. If you've watched the True Blood series, I'll just tell you, Eric Northman, he is an attractive man. I don't know, this is not verified by the author, but he's basically described by Sadie as corporate Thor. So, or maybe this character is based on Thor. I don't know. Maybe I'm just picturing Eric Northman. I'm not sure what the truth is. But he is very Eric Northman and Thor-esque. In fact, he has a slight accent because I think he's from Denmark originally. And there's some misunderstandings that go on between them. There's a very steamy night that goes on between them. And I recently reread this novella for comfort, and it worked. It did the trick. And I think you should check that one out if you're just looking for a really light kind of rom-com, but short and quick. I think you can just listen to it at this point, but it's a great listen. I don't think the novella is perfect by any means, but like I said, I really like the setting of women in STEM, and I really like this particular character of Sadie. She's really into soccer. She doesn't really think love is ever gonna find her or she find it, and she's just, like I said, this kind of quirky, superstitious character. And I don't know, I connected with her more than the other 2 females in the other 2 STEMinist novellas. By the way, if you'd like to see a review of those 3 books, the STEMinist novellas, let me know in the comments down below. I have another book that I bought around the time when Chapters Indigo was putting Heather's Pick stickers all over their books. Heather likes it and I like it. This book is called Under the Hawthorn Tree, and it is translated by Aimai. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. I apologize if it's not the correct pronunciation, but this is set during the Cultural Revolution in China, when everybody was expected to be a passionate and vocal communist citizen. There's a lot of slogans and propaganda, and that's the backdrop. I told you I like love amongst life, politically challenging situations, whether it's fantasy or real life. So in this book, we have our main character who is a young girl, and she is selected to go help write a textbook, and it's going to be written more from the perspective of everyday villagers. So she's sent to a small rural village, and there she meets an older boy who she eventually falls in love with. I'm switching to this side now. If you like stories of first love mixed with coming of age, mixed with some history, then you will absolutely adore this book. I have also watched the film with subtitles. I liked the film, but I definitely liked the book better. This is another one, like 10,000 Lovers, which I mentioned earlier, where sometimes I just reread the first part of it and I don't go all the way to the end because it does make me very emotional. but when I was first reading it, I could not put it down. It will always be one that I go back to for both comfort and joy, and a little bit of history, and a little bit of a reminder of what life is like for people in other circumstances. I have not seen a lot of other books set during the Cultural Revolution. I'm sure that there are some, but the translator did an absolutely beautiful job of bringing this story to life. All of the feelings you get from a first love wrapped up in a book set in China. This is a must read. If you're not looking for comfort and for some reason you humored me and watched this video, please pick this one up. My next book is none other than Pride and Prejudice by the incomparable Jane Austen. Now, this is the only Jane Austen novel I've actually read. I have watched a lot of adaptations of Pride and Prejudice. I go back to this one, like you can see how beat up it is. I've like thrown it in my bag and taken it with me everywhere. And it is just a cup of chicken noodle soup on a cold day in book format. It is a warm hug for me in book format. It has a little bit of comedy in there, a little bit of romance, one of my favorite tropes, which is enemies to lovers. By the way, it is one of the original successful enemies to lovers books. So many other great works have been inspired by Pride and Prejudice, and you may not have even realized that it's inspired by Pride and Prejudice. And I am not English lit major, and I don't know a ton about books written at this time, but I think it's really interesting that the author lived during this time period and wrote the book about that time period that she lived in, as opposed to something like Bridgerton, cough cough Julia Quinn. I have a lot of videos about Bridgerton season 1. I have one video about Bridgerton season 2, and one of the things I realized is that, well, this is an actual historical. Bridgerton veers into ahistorical, especially the TV show adaptation. The TV adaptation is more of like a fantasy, which is fine. I do love fantasies. I just think that some people, because it's a costume drama, might think that it's more historical than it actually is. So this is actually somewhat historically accurate. Don't be intimidated. It's not like a super long book, and if you don't like it, what's the worst thing that happens? You have a classic on your shelf. Okay. The next book I want to talk to you about, I don't have a physical copy with me in this room, so I'm just going to chat about it and put the picture up on the screen. And that book is none other than A Court of Mist and Fury by Sarah J. Maas. Sometimes when I reread this, I go back and, so sorry, if you don't know, first of all, how is that possible? A Court of Mist and Fury is a super popular book by Sarah J. Maas. It is book 2 in her ACOTAR, or A Court of Thorns and Roses series. So there is A Court of Thorns and Roses, A Court of Mist and Fury, and A Court of Wings and Ruin. And this middle one, A Court Akamaf, it's called for short, is an all-time favorite of mine. I have such attachment to this book, and it's not because it's the best book ever written. I enjoy Sarah J. Maas's writing. I know that people say there are problems with the book and the series and subsequent books that she's written, but what can I say? I am a stan. I am open to having, discussion and dialogue about how maybe the books could be better, etc. But I will never stop saying how much I like it, how much I enjoyed reading it. And what I will also tell you is, first of all, you need to start with The Court of Thorns and Roses. Even though that's not my favorite, it sets up the second book. Almost, if you could imagine them as one book divided into 2. Does that make sense? You just read the whole thing and then come back and talk to me. If you don't like it, that's okay. But I think that you will like it if you like a fantasy setting. So there is Fae, there is Hades and Persephone vibes, there is Beauty and the Beast inspiration, there is enemies to lovers, and it's going to be adapted into a television show. Ronald D. Moore, who also adapted Outlander very successfully, is going to be helping to adapt this one. I cannot wait to watch it. It is just so close to my heart. When I picked up A Court of Thorns and Roses, I was skeptical as I was reading it. I quickly got so immersed in this world And then there's so many other books that you can read by Sarah J. Maas, or so many other terrific fantasy romance books you can read. I, by the way, have 2 videos up on my channel right now. Both of them are about enemies to lovers fantasy romance books that I could not put down. I will link them for you in my description as well as on the cards up above. And I would not have read all of those terrific fantasy romance novels had I not picked up this series, had I not read A Court of Mist and Fury. So this is like Sarah J. Maas's best book. If you don't think so, argue with the wall. It is her best book. And if you are interested in kind of dipping your toe in the waters that are fantasy romance, this series is a great place to start, in my opinion. We are actually at my last comfort read book that I wanted to talk to you about, at least for today's video, and that book is also a fantasy romance. It is one, like I said, I discovered because I loved A Court of Thorns and Roses series, in particular A Court of Mist and Fury, so much. I went in search of books that I liked as much as that. You know, I had a hole in my soul, and it was filled by Rhapsodic. Rhapsodic is an indie fantasy romance by an author called Laura Thalassa. The book is about a relationship, and the relationship is between a siren called Callie and a fae king called Desmond. Desmond comes into our world, which is more of a urban sea setting, which has paranormal creatures like werewolves and obviously sirens and other types of creatures, witches, etc., but they don't play a huge role in the story. So this would be another really good one if you're looking to start reading fantasy with romance plot lines. This is a great kind of like starter, ease you into it. And this book's premise is that Callie is a young girl and something terrible happens and she needs help. So she doesn't have a lot of people to turn to in her life, so she calls upon the Bargainer. He is the fae king who will, basically he's somewhat inspired by the Greek god of Hades. He makes bargains. So you need something, want something, Bargainer's gonna get it for you, but he always collects. You have to give him something in return. Callie is in a very tough situation. He helps her out of it and even goes above and beyond because she is a minor. What ends up happening is she keeps making bargains with him and bargains because she just wants mostly to spend time with him. And he keeps accepting, and typically he collects on his bargains, but with her, she's a minor, like I said, and she's slowly getting older, and he's a fae creature, so I think he's like eternal. She wants to spend time with him. She keeps making bargains to make that happen because he's kind of trying to resist spending time with her, but they do spend a lot of time together, and you know that they do because she ends up with bracelets going all the way up her wrists filled with dark beads, and each dark bead symbolizes a bargain she has made with him. Her relationship with him is very important. She's going to school, and then all of a sudden he disappears from her life, and it doesn't matter how many times she calls him to try to make the bargain, he's not there. So that timeline, telling the story of what happens to her from that first bargain to all the subsequent bargains, that's woven throughout the book. And then you also get a lot of story that takes place in the present when he is returned suddenly into her life, and now he wants to collect on his bargains. She doesn't know why he left. She doesn't know why he's returned. And you as a reader get to go along for the ride of finding out the answers to those 2 questions. I really like the dynamics between Callie and Des, and the book focuses on those dynamics. It's very light at times, like you might say it's kind of like an easy read at times, but there is some tough subject matter in there in places. If you like it, there's more books in the Bargainer series that you can check out, and I would recommend this for anyone who's interested in a good love story with some very light fantasy elements, and if you like enemies to lovers, then this is the perfect one for you. So those are all my favorite comfort reads that I want to talk to you about. If you've read any of them, let me know in the comments down below. In the meantime, please give this video a like. It would really mean the world to me. Subscribe to my channel if you have not had a chance to do so already. My goal is to reach 1,000 subscribers, and I think I'm only at 200 and something. So I need your help, please. It would mean the world to me if you would subscribe. If you have any video requests or video ideas, anything you want to see me talk too much about, please also put those in the comments. In the meantime, this is Ashley saying happy reading. I hope you are reading a book that brings you comfort and joy if that's what you're looking for. Take care and have a great day. Bye.